Okay, what's going on with the brick, not the trick? Some of you may have been seeing these slab tubers posting that he's going to get 15 years. But I was looking at Mr. Mitchell's federal plea agreement and the federal sentencing guideline thing. Now, I'm not positive I'm reading the federal sentencing thing guideline properly, but I think I am. I do have an IQ of 149. So he's, as you can see by this document here, he's pled guilty to 3 offenses. So they describe them in this document here. So there's a search of his residence where they found the firearms and the ammunition. Then there was the spent shell casings. And then there was the FEMA application. So interesting, the spent shell casings alone have a score of 14. So in his original indictment, he popped off shots in front of maybe a dispensary. Sounds like, now, I don't want to create a new charge. It's sort of, I remember reading it, sounded like that might have something to do with like the Big U intimidation stuff, like he popped a shot off in front of that dispensary there where the Big U was extorting the guy. But anyway, so just so you know, they catch one shell on the ground with your fingerprint on it, or they, can prove that's a base offense score of 14. So you see, each of these have a baseline offense. I would imagine he took a plea, so they're going to run all of these concurrent. So I was thinking at first that they added up all the base scores, but they couldn't, because that would add up to like 48, which gets you life in prison, like no matter what the charge is. So probably they're just going to take, if he's pleading guilty, so he had 3 things: the spent shell casing, they raided his house and he had guns and ammunition, and then he filed a false FEMA application. So while he was, after he had gotten his house raided and waiting for all this stuff, and he was working on No Jumper, and there were those fires in Pacific Palisades, he filed a false application, which, I don't know, people just be doing anything. But the search of his house had the worst baseline score of 20. So I'm assuming they're just gonna use that. And then I calculated that he has, depending, so, and then they can, in connection with another, I'm sorry, 22. So that's plus 2, because there's multiple firearms. So if they count him at 22, and then his criminal history is 8 points. Where did I get that from? I think he has 8 points of criminal history. So that's 22 baseline with 8 category 4. 63 to 78 months. I think Bricc Baby is looking at 5 years in the feds. I mean, if Puffy got 50 months, Bricc Baby left a spent shell casing, that was maybe part of someone else's RICO. He had a bunch of guns in his house. He was on TV flashing. Remember, he was on, or not TV, but he was on No Jumper. He had the pistol tucked in his pocket or on his side when him and Loose Cannon, like, that was an intense. Adam is pretty irresponsible. Like, he let Loose Cannon and Bricc Baby be sitting there with guns, like, not knowing, are we cool or what? Like, what? I don't know. It seems pretty irresponsible. He doesn't seem to care. But I guess there's security there. I don't know. Seems like some stuff almost actually happened at No Jumper. Like the DW Flame and Bricc Baby stuff was kind of real. But anyway, so if he has a baseline of 22 and a criminal score of 8, last night I was researching this. Where did I get his criminal history of 8? But anyways, yeah. So I'm guessing he's going to get more like 5 years. People are saying 15 years because he could be eligible. He's eligible for the armed career offender. So all of you, be careful, man. The feds have an armed career offender. I think if you have had a previous gun charge, I'm not sure what Bricc qualifies for it. That's 15 off the rip. I think I was eligible for it, but my stuff is more than 15 years old. I think they can't use it against me, but I sure wouldn't want to have a gun charge. So if you've already had any gun charges, you get a federal gun charge, like you're in a bad predicament. That's why you guys got to be careful. Again, I say, if you're poor and you got to be in the street and make a couple bucks, is what it is. But to be in the street just as a lifestyle, you're retarded. Like the penalties, and then everyone want to be in a gang now. Literally all that being in a gang does is just add to your time. I mean, it can. And all these guns, man, there's so many charges they can find for you. I mean, he's got just from one spent shell casing. Disaster fraud. Oh, wow. They can give you up to a 12 base level of up to 19. Jesus. So he wouldn't have pled guilty, to take the armed career offender, because that would have probably been the worst thing he could have got. So I'm going to guess he's getting 5 years. So what did he have exactly? So in July 12th, 2022, he had 3 rounds of ammunition, which defendant fired from a 9mm gun. So 3 rounds, and then so a whole year passed. So that started Brick's problems. And then a whole year passed, and that's the one we remember from when he was already working at No Jumper and they ran in his place, June 23rd, 2023. So 11 months later, they went in his house. He had a .380. He had a 9. I had a Hell Pup, 5.6 times 45, so I guess a 45. 26 rounds of ammunition. Boy, they sure count the ammunition against you. 6 rounds of .380 ammunition, 31 rounds of Remington 5.56, 4.5, 1 round of Spear 45 caliber. All of the firearms and ammunition defendant possessed on both those dates had traveled in and affected interstate or foreign commerce. So they could have hit him with the Hobbs Act, which is what is all through Big U's indictment. That's you're interfering with interstate commerce. It's like, well, they can make almost anything a Hobbs Act violation. Robbing a bank. Right, any business that does business in multiple states, which isn't all businesses, but it's a lot of businesses. So that's probably the one of the sticks they were holding over Brick's head was the potential for Hobbs Act violations. Defendant possessed such firearms and ammunition knowing that he had previously been convicted of the following felonies. So this is his pre-existing record: reckless evading in 2010. So that's almost 15 years ago. Wow, 2010 is 15 years ago. That's wild. So that was a long time ago, but I guess they can just barely hold it against him. I'm not sure. How long can they hold stuff against you for sentencing? Maybe forever. Possession of a controlled substance in 2012. Another possession of a controlled substance, 2014. Criminal threats, 2016. Robbery, 2020. So that was he went on that big high-speed chase. I'm not sure. Does anyone know what? It seemed like he was on Melrose. Like, I think he was one of the people serving a lot of weed and lean and robbed somebody. I'm not sure. And he went on he went on a high-speed chase. And he spent several years in a county jail. They were trying to send him to prison for a while. Boy, sitting in the county for a couple years got to be miserable. But I'll give it, I mean, you do have to be mentally and physically, spiritually strong to sit in a county jail for a couple years and not take a plea. So I give it to Mr. Zihirr Mitchell in that account. And it seems like his spirits are good there in the federal lockup. But so he has a bad record. That robbery is bad. I mean, having been convicted of a robbery and then being caught with a bunch of guns and saying you're an active gang member, it just doesn't look good in front of a judge, man. I mean, that's the thing about opioids. They put a little barrier between you and the world where everything seems kind of okay and you can do kind of crazy behavior and it doesn't seem as risky and like, oh, well, because there's this buffer of lack of mental and physical pain between you and the world. And in fact, the word heroin, when Bayer invented it, they got the name from, they were asking the factory workers who they gave it to test it, how it made them feel, and they were German. Bayer aspirin is who invented heroin, and they said it made them feel, they used the word heroisch, Heroisch, which is German for heroic. So it gave them like a feeling of feeling important and they could do anything. Well, Bricc being high on lean all the time, going on high-speed chases, having a house full of guns, and running around talking cash shit, popping off shots. Popping that shot off is part of Big U's. I think Bricc Baby could kind of blame Big U for going to jail because Bricc Baby, those shell casing thing popped up in Big U's RICO. And phone conversations by Big U and others about referencing Bricc Baby and using him to do stuff and what he owed got Bricc Baby in the mix. Though Bricc Baby is not in Big U's case, and they didn't give him any Hobbs Acts, which, like I said, I just read, they could have, or they, claim they could. So Bricc is doing good to not be in Big U's indictment, but Big U's indictment caused that shell casing thing to go on Brick's name, and then they investigated him for 11 months. They probably watched him on the internet flashing guns and said, well, let's just raid his house. And lo and behold, he had a house full of guns. And January 7th, 2025, so... Well, when did he get taken into custody? Right before he went into custody. So separate and apart from defendant's possession of firearms and ammunition as a felon, on February 14th, 2025, defendant filed an application for disaster assistance with the Department of Homeland Security, knowingly and falsely claiming the defendant was renting a home in Pasadena that was destroyed by fire, lava, flow, ash on January 7th, 2025. So the FEMA offenses. Let's go back to his... Defendant understands and agrees that defendant's base offense level could be increased if defendant is a career offender or an armed career criminal, or if defendant has additional prior convictions for either crime of violence, robbery, but maybe it wasn't armed, or a controlled substance offense. Maybe that has to be selling it. Boy, they can, that's how they get people to take plea deals, man. They can start, I think where the feds is really bad is your priors really hurt you in federal. The priors hurt you in the federal. bad. They got bad laws. Like, they can really slam you. And hey, most Americans never get any felonies. So of the people that do, we tend to get multiple ones. So they can slam you. Okay. Waiver of constitutional rights. Defendant understands by pleading guilty, defendant gives up the following rights: the right not to be compelled to testify. The right not to be compelled to testify, and if defendant chose not to testify or present evidence, to have that choice not be used against defendant. Any and all rights to pursue any affirmative defenses, Fourth Amendment or Fifth Amendment claims, and other pretrials. So that sounds like if they, and I'm not here to say Bricc Baby's gonna snitch on Big U or anything like that, but just so you know, like when they write these things up, like if they were to pull him, see, this is, boy, even when you take a plea agreement, it's not, you're still sort of throwing yourself on the mercy of the court, because he gave up his right to plead the Fifth and to not testify if he has information. So if the federal government pulls him in front of the judge and says, well, you know, he was part of this Big U extortion scheme and he has information, which they could, because again, Bricc Baby's, all his problems started with that shell casing, which was part of the Big U RICO. They could say, well, he knows stuff and he needs to say it. And if he says, no, I'm not going to, they can hold that against him at sentencing. So, again, he probably can get a 5-year, but if they play hardball with him, I don't know. When is his sentencing? Pled guilty to all weapons charges. October 14th, current date. Also, trial pushed back. Oh, his trial was about to start, so he pled guilty to all. Yeah. 15-year sentence on the table. Yeah, so I don't think he's going to get 15 years. I think from my reading, and I'm not an expert at reading those tables, it looks like 5 years. Around 5 years, which, frankly, if he got 5 years, I think he's doing good. To have a house full of guns when you have had a robbery conviction and you've gone on a high-speed chase, and he's very lucky to not be in that RICO, or not, because the things that they say Big U do, create an umbrella of fear through his storytelling on social media. Umbrella of fear. Bricc Baby had that gun in his hip with loose cannon, you know, like, what's it gonna be? And Bricc Baby, I'm the kill squad, okay, I double hockey sticks. It's still probably up in the air for Bricc Baby. He's given up his rights to take the Fifth. And if the feds want to compel him to testify, he's going to take a penalty if he doesn't and get sentenced to more. So look for there to be more going on. You know, I don't know. Unless they I guess the best for him is to get sentenced ASAP before Big U stuff goes to trial, so they really can't force him. It doesn't sound, I don't think they need Bricc Baby. They got a lot of evidence. I don't think Bricc, at this point, I don't think he's going to do his time, and he wants to come home with his reputation intact. So that's my analysis of Bricc Baby's situation. I think he's looking at 5 or 6 years. I don't see how it's going to be less than that. It could be more. I don't think it's 15, though. We'll see. Al Prophet, best of luck to the Brick, not the trick. American Dope.